Ready? Okay. Okay. Ready? Okay. I want to welcome everyone to today's sustainability seminar. My name is Nancy Holm. I'm Assistant Director here and the seminar organizer along with Beth Micheski. Information on our future seminars in our series, which is on reuse and recycling this semester, can be found on our website, and also there are flyers outside the conference room here. I would like to ask everyone here in the room to please silence your cell phones, and then also we'll hold all the questions to the end for the speaker at the end of his presentation, and I'll go around with the microphone to if you have questions. And then for those online, you can type those into the chat box at any time, and then we'll take those questions at the end also. We're very pleased today to have with us as our guest speaker John Mulrow, who is presenting the webinar from Chicago. John previously worked here at ISTC as a sustainability specialist and recently moved on to become Interim Executive Director of Plant Chicago. Plant Chicago takes a hands-on approach to developing integrated systems for food production, energy conservation, and material reuse. They have a model for a circular economy that is taught to schools, public tour groups, and entrepreneurs, and they use their current pilot projects to demonstrate the tangible benefits of these systems. So John will discuss more about the plant, and will also explain how and provide a vision for other communities to do the same. So with that, welcome John Mulrow, and John, we'll turn the talk over to you.
Great, thank you. So just really quick, what do I keep my eyes out for here in case someone can't hear? Will I get notified if there's any sound problems on your end?
Yeah, I can let you know that.
Okay. Great. Well, yeah, I'm excited to be giving this presentation, and what I'm bummed about is not being able to make it to Champaign because I used to work at ISTC. I was based up in Chicago, but love the office down there and the laboratory, and the only reason I could make the trip is just that we're in a crunch. We're getting a USDA grant application in tomorrow, and anyone on the phone call who's done one of those before, and I'm sure everyone at ISTC knows, it's crunch time up here at the office. So anyways, I appreciate the chance to present by webinar, and I hope to take about 40 minutes to walk through Plant Chicago's work at the plant and the systems and partners we have at the plant, and then take questions and talk through kind of our vision of the circular economy at the end of the presentation. So the plant, some of you may have heard of the plant before. The plant is an old meatpacking plant, 93,000 square foot former pork products plant in Chicago's back of the yards neighborhood. And the building was acquired by John Adel, founder John Adel, and Bubbly Dynamics in 2009. And since then has been filling up with food entrepreneurs and farmers looking to build a new way of doing things, and kind of centered around the concept of exchanging materials that would normally be considered waste and making them inputs into production processes. And so you guys may have heard of that. Some of you may have visited. We do tours. We do a ton of school groups through the building. But today, in case you haven't been there, you can check out www.plantchicago.org to see more about the building and our work. But in the absence of actually getting there, I'm going to do a virtual building tour today and talk about all the activities happening in the building, and then talk about Plant Chicago's specific work as a nonprofit in this space. So let's see here. I go next. All right. So I'm going to start off with a quote, which is, "You don't have a toilet, you have a nutrient recycling system." And this, I think fits really well with the theme of this seminar series about recycling and reuse, and it really represents the realm that I like to start thinking in. This is a quote from Bill McDonough and Michael Brungart from their Update to Cradle book, which was released last year, called The Upcycle. And the world of reduce, reuse, recycle is moving rapidly away from the emphasis on individuals putting things in the right bin, and way more into the world of product design and economic and policy structures that influence materials to be used the wrong way. And so the mantra is that waste is not a noun, waste is a verb. Once there are only materials and resources, and what we do with them today is we waste them. But talking about waste management or waste reuse is kind of a misnomer in that sense. But I really like this one just because this goes extreme, right? If we can think of our toilet system and our plumbing system as a nutrient recycling system, that's a hopeful way to think about our waste problem in the world. And I think that's what's driving our work at the plant and Plant Chicago. So here's a picture of the building. This is the building after new windows were put in, but this is the old Pier Foods meatpacking plant at 46th and Bishop on Chicago's south side. And this is a great brick building. You can see that the building used to say Pier on the top, and now somebody got up there and flipped the P, and so now it says beer. And that is definitely a plan for the building, to have beer brewing going on in there. But this is an early on picture of the building, and you're used to seeing a lot of buildings like this on Chicago's south side. If you drive down Ashland Street, you find a lot of these old meat industry buildings that are just run down, and many of them are on the market for very cheap and kind of waiting for a developer to come along, knock it down, and build a shopping mall. So just reutilizing a building like this is actually fulfilling the mission of material reuse. Regardless of what happens inside the building, taking all that embodied energy and effort that was put into building this amazing structural entity is an effort in and of itself. And I'll mention that this building, the Pier Foods plant, was built in 1923, and it's 4-story, 94,000 square foot building with a basement, super well insulated, and extremely structurally sound. This building basically processed hunks of meat all day long and kept them at a constant temperature of 37 degrees Fahrenheit. And so the building is amazingly sturdy, like a lot of these old buildings are. We often tell tour groups you could put another one of these buildings on top of this building, and it wouldn't have a problem standing. So that makes it really attractive for doing food production and farming inside the building. But I'll back up really quick and just mention a few bits of history here. The plant, the building called the plant, is owned and operated by a company called Bubbly Dynamics, which is a small development firm made up of John Adel, who's the founder, and he's a general contractor, and his construction team. And Bubbly Dynamics got their start in 2001 when they inherited the Lowe's paint factory in Chicago's Bridgeport neighborhood and started fixing it up into what is now called the Chicago Sustainable Manufacturing Center. This is at 1048 West 37th Street in the city, so just a little north of the plant. And here's just a few depictions of the background and fixing up of the Sustainable Manufacturing Center building. Here it is when they inherited the building, and they used volunteer labor and friends of John's and other contractors and architects interested in this idea of not demolition but deconstruction and reuse to actually fix up the building and turn it into what it is today. So now the Sustainable Manufacturing, this is a picture of the inside, Sustainable Manufacturing Center houses several woodworking and metalworking workshops, several artist studios, and an after-school kids education program for sustainability. So that's John Adel on the left and his team at Bubbly Dynamics. They had so much fun and, frankly, so much success getting the Sustainable Manufacturing Center done that they wanted to move on to the next building. And in the late 2000s, they were experimenting with aquaponic farming at the Sustainable Manufacturing Center. And so that led John to start looking at buildings that would be appropriate for indoor farming. And that's when they came across the plant, the old Peter Foods building, that was on the market for $500,000. So if you think about it, 94,000 square feet and nearly 4 acres of land for $500,000 is a pretty good price. And that means the developer was basically calling it strip and rip, which is a building where you knock it down, you reclaim all the scrap metal, and you clean up the land to get a developer to move in there. And obviously, we view that environmentally, thermodynamically, from an engineering standpoint, as a waste, especially when the structure is so sound. And kind of one of the things that John always talks about is a lot of old buildings in Chicago do get repurposed, but most of them are repurposed into housing or commercial space or office space. What about repurposing them into productive space? Chicago and Illinois talk about bringing manufacturing jobs back. You need really solid structures and large spaces to do manufacturing well. And so we need to build the skills again to turn infrastructure that's waiting into usable space. So that's John and his team, and they're really the mechanics and the engineers behind the building structure at the plant. Plant Chicago is a nonprofit that started simultaneously with the building. And Plant Chicago was the first group to set up all the aquaponic farms inside the basement of the plant. So I'll just give you a quick preview because I'm going to walk through more systems in more detail of what Plant Chicago does. We do farming education. We run an aquaponics farm inside the plant, and we do indoor farming and urban farming education for everyone from budding entrepreneurs to school groups. Let's see, I think it's going slow here. The next one. There we go. Okay. We also have built many of our systems of waste materials, and so we educate not only about urban farming and food, and local food, but we educate about materials reuse. We give tours of the building and talk about the history of Pure Foods and the industrial spaces in Chicago, and we also demonstrate our own material reuse systems. So here you actually see these industrial totes were donated from Schulte and Birch, which many of you will know. Schulte and Birch is a large bakery, industrial bakery here in Chicago. They're a neighbor to the plant, and they make Pop-Tarts. So if you're ever going through Chicago and smelling Pop-Tarts or pastries, they make all sorts of good stuff in there. They're also a great company and have been recognized for their sustainability efforts and have donated a lot of materials for reuse to Plant Chicago. So these are our fish tanks that you're looking at here, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk about aquaponics specifically. The nonprofit also operates a mushroom farm. So the mushroom farm is a revenue generator for us. We actually grow oyster mushrooms, like these pink oysters, on waste straw from a nearby farm, and I'll talk about that process later as well. So Plant Chicago, the nonprofit, we run building tours of the plant. We do urban agriculture and reuse demonstration projects. We also conduct workshops on making your own aquaponic system, making your own home mushroom growing system, and working on developing a farmer training workshop series as well. We also run a volunteer program. There's a ton of work to do at the plant. It's not a finished building. It's not completely full. There's construction work to be done. There's also a lot of farming and outdoor landscaping work. And people want to get involved in this. We regularly get 40 to 50 people out to our volunteer orientations, which happen once a month. And we run a Saturday volunteer program with a big vegan lunch cook that happens, and people learning how to use tools and really using their bodies. People who are cooped up in an office all the time, getting out to really get involved in the next economy and sustainability in a physical way. And then we also run a farm stand where we sell goods that are grown in our farms and also in our partners' farms in the building. So there are actually 10 other tenants inside of the plant that do everything from baking to growing plants to keeping bees and distributing cheese and produce. So we've got a wide variety of people that we help out, and we run a central farm stand on the weekends where people can come shop for plant goods. So that's a nonprofit. I'll walk you through a few more details of the system. I mentioned our Aquaponics Farm, and for anyone who hasn't encountered this before, aquaponics is a combination of aquaculture, which is taking care of fish and raising fish, and hydroponics, which is raising plants based on water rather than in soil. We maintain an aquaponics system of currently about 1,500 square feet. It was larger, 3,000 square feet originally, but Plant Chicago's nonprofit operation has actually spun off several for-profit farms inside of the building. So there are 2 other aquaponic farmers inside of the plant, 2 other hydroponic growers, and then 1 other aquaculture farm doing saltwater shrimp inside of the plant. But just to summarize really quick, the basic concepts behind aquaponics is that fish, you maintain fish in separate tanks from plants. The fish poop in the water. The fish waste provides ammonia to the water. We send that ammonia-rich water through a filtration and oxidation process to turn that nitrogen source into nitrates, which are available to plants, and plants use nitrates to grow their leafy green matter. And then we have plants growing in these floating, if you look here on the right, you can kind of see these floating panels. They're on these small ponds of water, taking the filtered and oxidized fish water and taking it up through the roots. So the plants just sit in this floating platform and send their roots down into the nitrogen-rich water. And the water is then circulated back to the fish. So it's closed loop in terms of nutrient and water cycling. And I'll talk about one of the non-closed loops that we're working on at the end here. There's our demonstration system. So this is the nonprofit demonstration Aquaponics Farm. And you can see we're doing all sorts of plant varieties: peppers, fruiting plants, leafy greens, onion scapes. We have a few different systems and lighting types that we're demonstrating. We have 1 fish tanks for teaching people if they wanted to do a home aquaponics system with their aquarium, what would it look like? So our farm is really focused on education, whereas the other 2 farmers inside the building, which are Greens and Gills and Sky Greens, are focused on commercial production. So if you looked at their systems, they wouldn't have room for a tour group to walk around. They're building vertically, and they might be growing a more select variety of plants that are more profitable. Our mushroom farm is the coolest thing in the world. It's in a super creepy room in the basement that we keep humid and somewhat dark and warm for the mushrooms to grow. But the process is really fascinating. So we actually cultivate our own oyster mushroom spawn, started in a sterile lab inside the building, and then we receive waste straw from a nearby farm and combine the spawn, the mushroom spawn, with straw and stuff these bags. And you can see pretty well in this photo the hanging plastic bags that are tree-like, basically. So we hang these mycelia-seeded bags of straw in a warm, humid room, cut holes in the bag, and as the mycelia starts to take over that rich carbon source, eventually they want to fruit. And so they find the holes in the bag and they send their fruiting bodies outside the holes, and you get oyster mushrooms within a few days of the fruit starting to push out of the bag. You get a full-fledged oyster mushroom. And this is a nice revenue generator for the nonprofit because not a lot of people are growing fresh mushrooms in Chicago. So we can provide, we actually sell to a wholesaler who brings the mushrooms mostly to restaurants throughout the city. So that's our mushroom farm. We are starting to experiment with growing mushrooms on coffee grounds, and we're actually receiving coffee grounds from a nearby cafe called Jackalope in Bridgeport and starting that process. Here's our mushroom waste dump. So when we dump the straw outside, we get another round of free outdoor mushrooms, and this kind of just shows you in the outdoor area the beginnings of our composting operation, and we have a few different compost demonstrations happening on site. But everyone always wants to talk about compost, and we like to show people our mushroom pile, which is actually adding a little extra oomph to the soil by sending mycelia through. So it's just kind of a funky photo showing the mushrooms continuing to live outdoors. And we don't sell the waste mushrooms like that to the grocery store, if anyone's wondering. Next I'm going to talk about some things that happen inside the building that the nonprofit doesn't manage. These are the other tenants inside the building. So there is a bakery, there's a wood-fired oven, and they obviously make amazing breads. But the interesting piece when I talk about other partners at the plant is there's really a spirit of partnership and a desire to minimize waste and find innovative ways to reuse waste. So I will mention the beer brewery moving in later, but one of the ideas for closing a loop around the oven is that we could make our own fuel pellets using dried spent grain from the brewery to fire the wood-fired oven. Pleasant House, which is a savory pie bakery in Chicago, has one of their kitchens based at the plant, and they've been at the plant almost since the beginning. They make amazing savory pies. They use our mushrooms and greens as ingredients. They even run their own farm on the plant for ingredients, and their restaurant in Bridgeport is really popular, so they've brought a lot of attention to the plant and have been great about partnering on composting and waste minimization. I mentioned our farms using reused materials throughout the building, and I thought I would throw in a little picture of Ram just to show that we do have city support, and one of the city's first aquaponic operation licenses was issued for the plant. And I think that one of the pieces you'll see at the end of this that the nonprofit should be doing more of, and we want to do more of, but have been spending more time kind of breaking ground in this area, but policy, really outlining the policy measures, whether it's regarding zoning or permitting or things like landfill bans on food scraps. What are the policy measures that incentivize smart, closed-loop thinking, as well as material reuse inside of a building? And we're working on building that aspect of our nonprofit operation. The piece that really pulls it together for the building is the anaerobic digester that's being installed. And so this is a picture of the digester, the main digester tank being installed in the back lot of the plant. You can see the skyline in the background. This digester is a 30-ton per day unit, meaning it'll handle 30 tons per day of food waste. That's not all generated from the plant. In fact, most of that food waste will come from other parts of the city. And the digester will generate methane gas that can be used to produce electricity and heat for the building, but it'll also produce a digestate, a liquid and solid digestate that can be used on local farms as a soil amendment. So the digester is about halfway installed. The piece that's missing is the gas capture well, which I'm kind of showing with my mouse here, and then the second digester tank. Each tank is capable of handling 15 tons per day, so there needs to be a second tank here. And the system is designed to meet the peak heat and electricity demand of the plant when it's completely finished. I'll mention that just to give everyone an update on the digester, Bubbly Dynamics is working on finishing the financing of the entire project. So the digester is not operational yet, but it's been a great educational tool to have the first part sitting there, because it's fascinating. It's gotten a lot of interest going in the plant, and it's close to being a reality. I mentioned that the methane gas can be used in a combined heat and power turbine system to generate heat and electricity for the building. So just showing a little bit of those mechanics here. And then other pieces moving forward inside the building are the brewery. The brewery is actually just starting to install its brew houses and brewing equipment. So we expect to be drinking plant-produced beer by the fall. And I mentioned the closed loop with the spent grain, but there are a lot of really interesting waste loops that we can plug into with the brewery. Two other examples one involves the spent grain. We're working on making our own fish feed, and spent grain can make a great supplement for creating our own fish feed. And the CO2 that comes from the brewery fermentation tanks is a great resource for our farms. So we're looking at building a separate piping system for the CO2 from the fermentation tanks and pumping that to both our aquaponic farms and our algae bioreactor system, which we're just starting to test, outgrowing our own culture of algae on wastewater from the fish farm. Wow, this is disgusting up close. Sorry. This is a picture of black soldier fly larvae, and we had our first experiment last summer, hoping to grow it this summer, with raising black soldier fly larvae. This is another important piece of creating our own fish feed. The fish feed is really the open piece on that circular loop for the aquaponic farm, because we buy a commercial fish feed that's made of a mixture of soy and fish meal. We don't know where it comes from. Really, it's not very local, and I've read a lot of life cycle impact analyses of fish feed that don't turn out too well on the sustainability scale. So if we can figure out how to make our own complete protein fish feed on site, it would be really cool. And we can use algae for that. We can use spent grain for that, but we need a good source of protein. And the black soldier fly is really interesting because they have these massive larvae that can eat a ton of food waste at a time. And then the adult stage of the black soldier fly does not have a mouth, and the adult lifespan is super short. So basically, we can't end up with a bunch of flies off in another part of the building eating plants and breads and Pleasant House pies, because the adults actually can't eat anything. And that's what makes the black soldier fly attractive for that system. Here's some other material repurposes happening inside the building. These are the old smoker units. These are being turned into classroom space and bathrooms and shower rooms inside the building. This is a picture of a finished space, so you can see kind of what the building went from being this abandoned old building with kind of paint smears and charred ceilings to a completely finished space. And what you're looking at is the Great American Cheese Collection's new cheese distribution space inside the building. I'll point out these chiller units are really interesting. They were left in the building, and they used to be run on an ammonia loop, and they're now, the Bubbly Dynamics engineers actually turned them into running on a glycol loop, which is much safer for maintenance workers to work with. And so these are old repurposed chillers doing the refrigeration work inside the building. And here's just a depiction of volunteers, a typical volunteer work day. This is in the brewery space. And like I mentioned, these are Chicago's eco warriors coming out to learn about building deconstruction and infrastructure reuse, and doing some great work making the vision of the plant happen. The plant is, by design, very much not it's hard to get commercial investment, I'll say, for a project like this, because in many ways it's so out there and non-traditional. And so volunteer work and community fits into this picture really well. Just a little more example of some job skills being taught at the plant, how to use a jackhammer. And so I'll end on this diagram here that kind of pulls a lot of those material loops I was talking about together. And I'm wondering if I can get a higher resolution version of this pulled up. Oh. Well, there's our chickens. I didn't mention those, but while we're here on the picture slide. All right. So here's the closed loop diagram that kind of maps everything together. And as I mentioned, the pieces that aren't happening yet are the anaerobic digester and the brewery. But all of these other material exchanges are actively happening at the building. I talked about the waste from the mushrooms going out to the outdoor farms, the food waste that feeds the digester, but also currently feeds our compost piles in the outdoor area. And the product exchanges, the other recaptured byproducts, for example, CO2 between the breweries and the farms, nutrients between the farms and the fish. And then we do think of social impact as a material or an impact that flows through the neighborhood and through the building. So we provide tours of the building free to residents of Back of the Yards. We're currently developing Spanish language educational materials and tours, and we host probably between 2 and 10 school field trips at the plant every week, coordinated by the nonprofit. So that we have a big version of this closed loop diagram in the lobby of the plant that we walk people through, and it's just a nice way to envision the whole system for people. And this is also what motivates new tenants to move into the plant. So the plant itself, I mentioned there are 10 tenants inside the building, the nonprofit being one, the bakeries, other farms, a kombucha brewer, outdoor farmers being other tenants. But the building is still only about 50% full. So this is my call to budding urban food entrepreneurs and circular economy thinkers to come out, check out the plant, and think about starting your business here and joining this material exchange system we have going on. I'll jump back on and just mention we're finding this circular economy term to be really appropriate for the level of conversation we want to have about infrastructure in Chicago, the idea of bringing manufacturing and productivity back to the city, and the concern that people have about both climate change and material efficiency. And we want to up the level of conversation to talking about the economic system that makes those things work. I mentioned policies like landfill bans or decreased permitting requirements for small food entrepreneurs or farmers, backyard composting regulations. These are the types of topics we need to be talking about, not just individual action, but what factors really influence making things again in our city and building real wealth locally. And that term local is really important to us as well, because the plant is full of small, independent, Chicago-based business owners. And while we don't necessarily have opinion about private-public cooperative things like that, we do think that local ownership is really important. And actually the Andersonville Chamber of Commerce, Andersonville is a neighborhood on the north side of Chicago. The Andersonville Chamber of Commerce did a study that showed that a dollar spent in a locally owned store in Andersonville tends to keep about 63 cents on the dollar in Chicago, whereas a dollar spent at a chain store with non-local ownership tend to only keep about 43 cents per dollar in Chicago. So locally owned businesses keep local economies stronger. They keep value circulating in the community better. And we're working on tracing both the history of the plant and factors like the increasing awareness about waste impacts, the increasing awareness about local business, the importance of small business and entrepreneurs, and the increasing disparity between rich and poor, trying to pull that all together into the story of what Chicago could look like with a preference for local and a preference for circular in the future. And so that's where our mission statement is building circular economies, inspiring urban communities, and the inspiring part comes out of our volunteer programs, and it's so important because that's how you get people to switch out of the lifestyle or the way of doing things that they may have been used to before. So we want people to see the old buildings while they drive down Ashland Street and think of opportunities to reuse those buildings, not knocking them down and building another shopping mall. And I thought I'd pull a few trends that are just interesting. This term circular economy I think is cool, and it's really resonating with people. These are just Google Trends and Scopus, which is an academic journal database. And you can see the massive growth in this term, circular economy, over the past few years. But unfortunately, this other term, which is environmental justice, which deals with urban communities and their relationship to manufacturing and industry, that term's dying down a little bit in the trends. And so we want to bring those two issues together and talk about people and making things at the same time. I'll just finish with another quote from that same book, The Upcycle, which is, "Start where you are." And Bill McDonough is a great speaker. I'm sure a lot of you have checked him out, but he's really good at staying positive and not getting stuck in the weeds about how bad things are with climate change and resource availability, and thinking about how do we act boldly and get something done. And I just love this quote, "Start where you are." I think it's exactly what's happening here at the plant, and it's the reason we get volunteers out and we have such community building. We're launching a farmers market this summer along with the Back of the Yards Neighborhood Council, and we expect to, at least our first test market, which wasn't even official last weekend, had over 7 vendors and over 300 attendees. So we're looking forward to a successful summer of building the nonprofit and getting the brewery moved in and the digester up and running. And I would encourage you all to check out plantchicago.org, check out our tours and educational offerings. And my email is there. I'm totally down to ask questions. I can send follow-up references to some of the systems and papers and concepts that I talked about. So I will wrap it up there and leave a little more than 15 minutes for questions.
Hey, John, I got a question on the screen here. Based on the used straw, what was its previous use? Is this from animal bedding or something else?
It's actually excess. So that specific question we actually have to answer better. The straw comes from a farm, and all we know is that they need to get rid of it, and they sell it at a cheaper price to us. I'm not sure if it's previously animal bedding. I don't think it is. It comes in pretty clean. But it may be excess that doesn't meet their standards. That's a great question, though, and I'd love for that person to email me so we can figure that one out together.
Okay, thanks, John. I'm going to open it up to questions here at our conference room. So if there's questions from the audience here.
John, what are you doing with your roof?
Is that Jim?
Yeah. Hi, John.
Nice. Hey, Jim. Let's see if I can back up here. So currently on the roof there are beehives, and some little news I can share with this crew is a couple of graduates from the Sweet Beginnings program. Sweet Beginnings was a 2014 Governor's Award Sustainability Award winner. A couple of graduates from the Sweet Beginnings program will be putting beehives on the roof this summer. There's already a program called Like a Bee that has honeybee hives on the roof. And the Sweet Beginnings guys may be doing honeybees, they might be doing mason bees as well. So that's what's currently happening on the roof. But you can see here in the diagram we do have greenhouses written in. The only thing holding us back from doing a really solid greenhouse on the roof is financing. And that kind of relates to the USDA grant that we're doing today. But the roof, as I mentioned, the building could hold another one of itself on itself. So we actually have the opportunity to do some really solid farming of the roof. A system that just got started dealing with the roof, now that the weather's warming up and things are starting to melt, the roof is huge. There's about 20 roof drains on the roof, and so about a quarter of those roof drains have been redirected to a large brine tank, a big salt tank that was inside of the building that supplied salt to the various pork processing aspects of the building. That's a 25,000-gallon tank, and I wish I had a picture of it, but it's a 25,000-gallon tank that's been emptied of all its salt, cleaned out, and now collecting rainwater, or what now is snow melt, from the roof top. And that water can be reused as irrigation on the farms. Just to give you an idea of what that size, 25,000 gallons, it's estimated that that tank could handle about 3 heavy rainfalls worth of rainwater.
Do you have some purifiers on the water that's coming out of the tank before you use it, or are you treating it in any way?
The water that's collected from the rain will not have an intense treatment process, but like a simple, currently it doesn't have anything, and there are designs for a simple filtration and sedimentation process, but because it's will mostly be used in the landscaping operation in the outdoor farm, it's not being looked at too much. Although, once we get all those roof drains redirected, we're going to have a lot of water to reuse.
Okay. I'll see if there's anything here.
How you doing, John? This is Troy Walker.
Hey, Troy.
Hey, in regards to your aquaponics, is there a certain species of fish that lends itself better to this process, or how do you guys determine what kind of fish?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. We're using tilapia, which are a hardy, warm, freshwater fish. And tilapia and catfish tends to be the warm, freshwater aquaculture system fish. And I don't know enough about aquaculture to explain the reasons why. But I know that tilapia and catfish are very common for those systems. And there are also cold water aquaculture systems that have a whole different set of variety. But tilapia is super common for these types of indoor aquaculture operations. So yeah, we're using tilapia. We have about 300 tilapia in our farm, and total in the building there's about 1,500 tilapia amongst the other aquaponics farms. And those fish sell to local restaurants and individuals who come to our farm stand as well.
We have a question from online.
Yep.
What groups are working with you on deconstruction projects and adapted reuse remodeling?
So Bubbly Dynamics has a lot of experience in the adaptive reuse and deconstruction. Based on their work on the Sustainable Manufacturing Center, which I mentioned. So led by John Adel and his team, they do a lot of the work, and they have a really impressive model of saving and sorting materials as the deconstruction happens. But along the way, I should mention that the construction manager for the building, his name is Allison Arson, and he's the former, he's formerly with the Rebuilding Exchange in Chicago, which is one of the main building material reuse warehouses in the city. So he's got a ton of experience with identifying wood types, material types, knowing what is useful and what isn't, and he's really taken it up to a next level. He's gotten the Building Materials Reuse Association, BMRA, involved, and Ann Nicklin from BMRA has been through the building several times to comment and provide suggestions. We also have a member, Bryant Williams from the Cook County Department of Environmental Control, who works on their 3D ordinance, is on the Plant Chicago Board of Directors. So that kind of keeps us, that keeps our tabs on current trends in deconstruction around the building. And of course, thanks to the Cook County 3D ordinance, we see a lot of that activity growing. I'd be interested to know if that person who asked that question has specific ideas of other firms or groups we should be working with. But I guess
they also asked, what is, are you saying bubbly dynamics?
Yeah, it's a weird. Just get past the weirdness of the name, and it's the name of a company owned by John Adel that owns and operates the building. So they're essentially the landlord for the building. The nonprofit does research on the material exchanges in the building, and we do demonstrations, but we're not the landlord for the building. The landlord is a company called Bubbly Dynamics, LLC. The reason they're called Bubbly Dynamics is their first building sits atop and near Bubbly Creek, which is the famous creek that used to bubble with all the animal parts and fats and blood rushing into it from the stockyards. So if you know Chicago, you know Bubbly Creek, and that's where they got their name, Bubbly Dynamics.
Also, how are mason bees different from honeybees?
I am just starting to learn about this from, the group is called the West Side Bee Boys, and they're a group of graduates from the Sweet Beginnings program who started their own honey company in Chicago. And I can't explain, I don't know enough about it currently. I just know that mason bees do pollinating differently. So I think they're, I'm gonna botch it if I try and explain it. But I know that related to the development of an orchard in the building, or an orchard in the outdoor area, the West Side Bee Boys want to do mason bees because they're more beneficial to trees and the orchard than would normal honeybees. And I think I just remembered that one of those reasons is mason bees don't forage as widely. Mason bees tend to forage within a certain radius that is way smaller than honeybees. Honeybees travel really far to find nectar, and mason bees will do pollinating very locally.
Do they still make honey?
Yes, they make a product, and I can't remember if it's harvestable or not. Sorry about that.
Next question is, if someone is interested in investing in the plant, who should they contact?
You can contact, well, I can give you the information. I can announce Carolee Coppola is the manager for Bubbly Dynamics. She's the operations manager, and she would be the contact. So if that person would just email me, I will get them Carolee's information.
Okay, I'll see if there's any other questions here from our audience. Do we have one here?
Hi, John. This is Wei. Actually, my question is not for your talk. My question is about hydroponic system. You have your slide shows you looks like you have some collection with some hydroponic facility. So I just wondering in the future, if it's possible, I can take some samples, some plant samples and water samples from there. Or you maybe give some contact information.
Definitely, we can get you some. We can get you some water samples. I sent some shrimp waste samples to Rupa recently, and that was my first time ever shipping poop, which was really interesting. But I'm happy to send you water samples too.
Yeah, right now I'm working some USDA proposal. So this is for food safety. So I'm working with a UY, the professor. He working on the, we think about for the passenger and some chemical internalization and the food, food uptake, especially for the hydroponic system. So that's why we're wondering, is it possible, because for the fisher, I know the system maybe they using some hormone, whatever. So that's why we want to see have the water have the residue can pass through, can uptake by plant through in the hydroponic system. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I would love to look at that.
Okay.
And forgive kind of a half thought through question, but while I'm listening to you.
Hey, Jim. Might be your guy's microphone.
Oh.
I don't think I heard the question.
Okay, we'll try again.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. No, I'm thinking while I'm listening to your presentation, you're talking about a circular economy. So I'm wondering, what is a break-even point in a circular economy, and have you reached it?
The break-even point in terms of dollars and cents.
In terms of however you define it, that's kind of what I'm struggling with.
Okay. Well, actually, the circular economy, and I unfortunately missed the chance to show the diagram that really nails this well. But if you look up the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, they're doing a lot of promotion and idea generation and thought leadership around the circular economy. But the idea was formalized in the Cradle to Cradle book, where design of products is based on two different material cycles. One is two different nutrient cycles. One is a technical nutrient cycle, and one is a biologic nutrient cycle. And technical and biologic nutrient cycles should be kept separate, rather than currently what we have now. We have a lot of products that are a mesh of technical and biological nutrients, like plastics melted into fabric, and different glues that get in the way of separating and deconstructing materials and separating them back to their basics. In a cradle-to-cradle design or a circular design, you keep technical and biological nutrients separate so that they can be recycled easily at the end of their life. And recycled, not downcycled. So recycled, again, into the same usable product, so bottles to bottles, food to soil, that type of cycling. So I guess the break point would be, or the dividing line between like when you're in the circular economy and when you're not, is when you've got a product or a process that captures or reuses 100% of materials. And that's also the message of zero waste. But that circular economy piece relates specifically to the cycling of nutrients. But I think it is a good question to talk about the break-even point economically. And the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, if you read their Towards the Circular Economy report, estimated that the savings to the European economy for instituting circular economy design for a certain set of industries in the country would represent something like a $6 billion savings, I think, annually to the economy. And you'll have to look up that reference. I had it in this other presentation that I wasn't able to turn up for this morning. But there's some really good work being done on the estimated dollars and cents efficiencies of moving to a circular economy. And I'll say the last thing is the big boost to this term circular economy happened a couple years ago when the Chinese government issued their latest 5-year plan and actually included a circular economy goal for their most recent 5-year plan. So if you go on any academic journal database and you type circular economy, about 50% of the papers are coming out of Chinese universities right now because the government is funding industries and academics to look into how to measure and incentivize these processes.
A couple more of the online questions.
Okay. I'm not hearing anything. I don't know if there's a question. Is there a question?
Hey, John.
Yeah. Still not hearing anything.
Hey, John, if you can look in the chat box for the questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Those are the last ones that are there.
Okay, the chat box, and I'm looking for
questions.
Organizers only, send questions. I don't see. I'm in the chat box. I see Nancy Holm. If there are any questions, please ask, and then I don't see anything else beyond that. Organizers and presenters only. I'm not hearing anything, guys. Sorry. Sounds like squeaking and.
Yeah, I think the microphone's battery must be going because it keeps kicking in and out. Let me see if I can get this last one. What's the maker or brand name of the anaerobic digester?
Eisenman. They're a German company. And they have a headquarters, U.S. headquarters here in Libertyville, Illinois.
Can you spell that?
E-I-S-E-N, M as in Mary, A-N-N as in Nancy. So, Brian, you're the only one I can hear. So if you got another question and you can ask it, then I can hear it.
The only one that's asking right now is that, can only hear me?
Yeah, I can only hear when you speak. And maybe I'm not even hearing you anymore, Brian. I don't know if other people are having that same problem.
Yeah, I think must be the microphone. So let me switch something real fast. Can you hear me now, John?
Yes.
So this one might have a little bit of feedback problems because I'm on the laptop now.
Okay, no problem.
No, I'll cut that off. The last one is, did grant money come from the state or AD system or private funding?
The Anaerobic Bubbly Dynamics LLC received a DCEO grant for the digester, $1.7 million to put the digester in, and the remaining $1 million to finish the installation and setup is being raised right now. And that's all I know about Bubbly's work on raising the funds for the project.
Okay, I think that's all the questions were covered.
Cool.
John, so I think that's all the questions. So thank you very much for your talk today. I'm sure everyone's interested in coming up to take a tour, and those who would like can email you with other questions. And I want to thank all of our listeners and those here in the audience. And we look forward to our next seminar, which will be on April 2nd. So thanks very much, John.
Okay, thanks, guys. I'll get down to Champaign soon. See you guys soon. All right, bye.
Bye, John.
Bye.
Okay.